Welcome, everyone, to today's session of Hot Topics in Nutrition focused on fiber, led by Hillary Wright. This program is hosted by the Blum Resource Center. Over at the Blum, we are grateful to the nutrition team for this continued partnership. The recording of the session will be posted on our Blum YouTube playlist and our Blum Digital Resource Center. For those of you watching live, if you have any questions related to today's program, please feel free to utilize the chat feature throughout the session. At the end of the session, your questions in the chat will be used to moderate a Q&A. If you have any other questions or would like more information about resources and programs offered through the Blum, please visit our website at www.dana-farber.org/resource center or email us at blum_center@dfci.harvard.edu. Thank you all for joining us. I will now pass the workshop over to Hillary.
Thank you so much. So today we are going to drill down on dietary fiber. I know it seems like sort of a basic topic, but in my experience, oftentimes people hear about fiber, but they don't really understand what it is, what it's all about, and why it can make such a difference in our health if we consume it in quantities that we know are meaningful. So I'll keep kind of returning back to that topic or that point as we go through this. So what is dietary fiber? So dietary fiber is a type of carbohydrate found only in plant foods, so fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Dietary fiber is unique in that in humans, it cannot be digested down. So you have to be a ruminant animal like a goat or a cow and have four stomachs to actually break down fiber and get calories out of it. But for humans, we don't fit that criteria, so the dietary fiber passes through our intestines without being digested, and that's how it actually imparts a lot of its health benefits. Most of us are familiar with dietary fiber helping to relieve constipation, but it is also associated with lower blood glucose levels, so it's an important part of diabetes prevention and control, and also can lower your blood cholesterol levels. So the two main primary types of fiber in foods are categorized as either soluble or insoluble, and that has to do with their water solubility. So soluble fiber dissolves in water and forms into a gel-like substance that slows down digestion. So soluble fiber sort of acts like a sponge in our GI tract, sopping up excess water. Insoluble fiber does not dissolve in water and actually is a big part of its function is to provide bulk to the stool, which makes stool easier to pass and reduces the risk of constipation. So the one way I like to think about dietary fibers when it comes to controlling constipation, because that's something that many of our patients deal with related to medications, pain meds, anti-nausea meds, and just general circumstances around cancer care. So if you think of dietary fiber as bulking up what's left in your digestive tract after all the absorption occurs, it sounds like a weird association, but it works. It's kind of like if you had a brand new tube of toothpaste and it was full of toothpaste, all you had to do was squeeze it a little bit to get the toothpaste to come out. But if you get down to the bottom of the tube and there's not a lot of paste left in there, you have to kind of really twist it and turn it and crunch it. So it's the same with dietary fiber in our GI tract. The more bulk that's present, the easier it is for the contractions of the peristalsis to move the fiber through your system. So what are the benefits of dietary fiber? And again, this is when consumed consistently. And the reason why I'm going to continue to return to this point is that many people are eating foods that contain dietary fibers, but not the amount that we believe really can impart some significant health benefits. So I want you to kind of think along this topic of other things that we might do for our health. So for example, if you have a headache and you take 2 Tylenol, it generally goes away. If you only take half of a Tylenol, you may still have a headache. So that's what we're seeing often in people's general consumption of dietary fiber, and I'll review the recommended goals later. So as I already mentioned, dietary fiber, when consumed consistently, softens stool and increases the size, making it easier to pass. Soluble fiber, that fiber that sops up fluid in the gut, actually also binds to dietary cholesterol in the intestines, preventing it from being absorbed thereby helping to lower your blood cholesterol levels. Dietary fiber lowers glucose levels because if you're eating a carbohydrate and part of the carbohydrates in there are fibers, well, those are not going to end up as sugar in your blood or glucose in your blood to raise your blood sugar. Also, dietary fiber, because we can't digest it, during digestion, our digestive systems need to basically sift through the fiber and liberate the glucose and the other nutrients so they more slowly get released off into your bloodstream. That means that blood glucose levels after meals will rise slower. The slower our blood sugar levels rise, the slower they fall. And so that helps to keep our blood glucose levels rolling in a nice kind of rolling hills, healthy manner. When you take the dietary fiber out of a grain, for example, whole grain to white flour, brown rice to white rice, you take away the fiber, there is very little standing between our digestive enzymes and the glucose in those carbohydrates, so blood sugar levels will rise more rapidly. High fiber foods may also help you feel fuller longer because of this kind of delay they produce in the processing of foods. So they tend to be more filling in addition to regulating this blood sugar level, which is a lot of what contributes to our brain's sense of, am I hungry? Do I need to eat again? So again, if you have this rolling hills blood sugars, you get more satiety or fullness leverage out of your meals and snacks than if you're eating mostly refined carbohydrates. And dietary fiber also benefits our digestive tract by acting as a major source of fuel for the healthy bacteria that's in our gut that we call our microbiome. This is kind of a technical slide, but I'm just going to break it down to you. So our microbiome is basically refers to the trillions of healthy microbes that live in and on our body that provide very important and critical health benefits. So much of the bacteria that lives in our body lives in our digestive tract. So actually, I think the next slide, I'm going to do that first. So we have trillions of these microbes. They make up actually about 1 to 3% of our entire body mass. Most of these microbes are bacteria. Most of them live in the gut, though there are also fungi and viruses that we're used to thinking of them as all bad, but these are actually a really healthful, important part of our GI tract. So gut microbes aren't part of our body. They coexist with us and provide many critical functions, including about 70% of our immune response. So dietary fibers are among the most plentiful, what we call prebiotics, food for the microbiome. Those microbes we call probiotics. So the prebiotics feed the probiotics, and they produce countless compounds that we refer to as postbiotics that act as anti-inflammatories, antioxidants, help our body to detoxify, lower our risk of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, good for our brain, and as I said, provide about 70% of our immune response. So in terms of the connection between the microbiome and cancer, it's really evolving. We don't really fully understand all the aspects of this. So it's not thought that many microbes contribute directly to cancer, but some may be involved in their growth and influence our immune system. So emerging research suggests the gut microbiome may have a role to play in the effectiveness of immunotherapy, chemotherapy, or radiation. So that's kind of an interesting thing for us to continue to follow. We do know that those who consume more dietary fiber have more microbiome diversity. We also know, this is one of the earlier findings, that we appreciate the connection between the microbiome and cancer is the connection between dietary fibers fueling these microbes and them then producing these postbiotics that are referred to as short-chain fatty acids. These are the primary fuel for the cells that line our colon and our rectum. And so one large meta-analysis, so that's a review of many different studies, 25 in this instance, found that for every 10 grams of dietary fiber in your diet, your risk of colon cancer goes down by 10%. So this is really important. It's one of the considerations that we're thinking about around this thing that we're noticing where younger people are developing colorectal cancer. hence the recommendation to lower the age of first colonoscopy to age 45. And one of the contributing elements is believed to be diets that are lower in dietary fiber starting at a younger age. So there is a clinical trial currently going on that's testing whether fiber-rich foods, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, whole grains, nourishing the microbiome may improve the odds that the cancer treatment someone is undergoing may be more effective. So this is going on at MD Anderson in Houston. It is very important to know, despite all the hype on the internet and social media, that the area of probiotics, which microbes benefit which health conditions, is very much in its infancy. We do know that food sources are never going to be a bad bet, which we'll talk about. But if you go into a pharmacy and you're looking at the wall of probiotics, trying to pick and choose, I'll give you a hint of where to look for the most evidence-based, but do know that this is definitely in development. So we do know that we acquire our microbiome within the first 3 years of life, and it remains relatively stable throughout the lifespan. So this is actually a really good reason to let kids get dirty when they're little, because that exposing them to the environment is helping to develop their microbiome. But this community is really dynamic and can be affected by diet, by travel, antibiotic use, we're familiar with that, and intestinal infections. But microbial diversity is a sign of resiliency and desirability, and is something that we all want to nurture. Most of that is to provide a defense against what's called dysbiosis, which is defined as a lack of diversity and can be related to several chronic health conditions, including colorectal cancer, but also type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So, again, what about probiotics? So we can find them in foods and we can buy them in dietary supplements, but this is still a lot that we don't understand about how individual people's bodies may interact with different types of probiotic supplements. So again, it's an easy, safe bet to try to incorporate some foods that have naturally occurring probiotics. So that would be yogurts with live active cultures, and then fresh sauerkraut and kimchi. So that's the kimchi, the sauerkraut that you may buy in the refrigerator section. So it's important to appreciate that if we pasteurize a food, we kill the microbes. So yogurt has cultures added back to them after pasteurization. But again, probiotic supplements should be used with caution as their effects are strain specific, but we still have a lot to learn about which strains are beneficial for which specific health conditions. For example, this website here, which is the usprobioticguide.com, tries to collate research on different types of probiotic products and where there may exist level 1 research supporting their benefits. So for example, there's a product called Florastore that has level 1 research tying it to a good product to reconstitute a healthy microbiome after a course of antibiotics. But again, there's not a ton of research on most of these products that are out there. So how much fiber do you need? According to the National Academy of Medicine, for men age 50 or younger, it's 58 grams. For women, it's 25. For women and men age 50 and older, 21 grams for women, 30 grams for men. A general rule of thumb is about 14 grams of 14 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories. So what does the average American consume? About 16 grams a day. So most of us are coming up way short on recommended amount of fiber. Now, of course, besides fiber, there are other things that are in plant foods that may benefit cancer risk, enhanced survivorship. So plant foods contain vitamins and minerals that are involved in a lot of important physiologic processes. Plants contain thousands of chemicals that we kind of lump together, refer to as phytonutrients, which are natural anti-inflammatories, antioxidants, help the body to detoxify. So these phytonutrients mix and match in countless combinations that are unique to individual foods that provide their natural defense. So basically, these probiotics make up the immune system of the plant, and we now understand when we eat those compounds, we have a similar benefit. Plant foods contain heart-healthy mono and polyunsaturated fats, like the typical Mediterranean options, olive, canola, peanut oil, avocado, olives, nuts, seeds, nut butters. Plant-based anti-inflammatories contain alpha-linolenic acid found in flax seeds, walnuts, chia, hemp, many other commonly consumed vegetable oils. They're also very healthy sources of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not bad. There's a big difference between Pop-Tarts and quinoa. So we have to make sure in this current environment where there's a lot of negative press around carbohydrates that we don't make the mistake of associating all carbs as not being good for us, because if you look at this list of healthy carbohydrates, there's lots of health benefits to be had by eating fruits and vegetables and beans and whole grains, brown rice, quinoa, farro, etc. And then we also can get very healthy sources of protein from plants. Soy protein, quinoa has protein in it, legumes, nuts, seeds, though there are small amounts of protein in just about every plant food. So just to kind of double down again on that phytonutrient thing a little bit. Most people are familiar with this if you've ever heard that like dark chocolate or tomatoes or grapes are good for you. You know, these compounds that act as these natural anti-inflammatories and antioxidants also give plants their color and their smell and their taste, which is why you hear these simple messages that will say, eat a variety of colorful fruits and vegetables, eat according to the rainbow, because it's a lot more absorbable information than saying, eat more polyphenols, carotenoids, isocyanates, and lutein. But, you know, when you're smelling strawberries, for example, you're not smelling vitamin C, you're smelling their unique combination of phytonutrients. And each plant food has hundreds, if not more, unique phytonutrients in them. So, you know, we tend to kind of lump these or group them into color categories just to sort of make that point that if you looked at a salad, for example, and it had green leafy vegetables and red beets and tomatoes and carrots that are orange and mushrooms and maybe berries in there, you're really diversifying the phytonutrients. There's one category of vegetables called cruciferous vegetables, which is broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, any kind of cabbage, radishes, arugula, are very plentiful in these isocyanates, which digest down into enzymes that help to detoxify the liver. So that's a very helpful category to include regularly. But what else does eating more plant foods do to help moderate cancer risk? Well, they're lower in calories and they're more filling. So they may help with weight management, which is one of the most evidence-based cancer reducing and survivorship strategies. So, you know, that can be very intimidating when we drill down on things like body mass index. So we just want people to be at the healthiest weight they can be, given their unique circumstances. But any activities or actions that people take to moderate weight gain over time is a really helpful cancer survivorship strategy. Also, making more efforts to eat more plant foods may displace higher calorie foods, again, making weight management more achievable. What's really true is that eating more plant foods generally requires preparing more foods at home. I mean, when I show you these balanced plate visuals that we use, most restaurants will not cover half your plate with vegetables. You can certainly do that with salads, but the portions of vegetables tends to be smaller in restaurants than what we would encourage people to try to aim for each day. Anytime someone replaces eating out with eating at home, it's likely to save them hundreds of calories, based on a study from Tufts University that found that the average restaurant meal has 1,200 to 1,450 calories, not including drinks, appetizers, or desserts. So how many fruits and vegetables should we aim to eat for daily, according to the American Cancer Society and the U.S. Dietary Guidelines for Americans? That's at least 2.5 to 3 cups of vegetables and at least 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit each day, depending upon someone's calorie requirements. If you wanted to break that down into just on average, what's the bottom rung look like for fruits and vegetables? This translates into 2 to 4 servings of fruit and 3 to 5 servings of vegetables. So at least 2 servings of fruit daily, at least 3 servings of vegetables daily is what we're talking about to get in that meaningful amount of fiber, phytonutrients, and all the other health promoting aspects of fruits and vegetables to produce that benefit. So if you say, I'm going to have a fruit in the first half of the day and a fruit in the second half of the day, then you hit that 2 servings of fruit. If you say, I'm going to have a double dose of vegetables with my dinner, but I'm also going to try to work some into my lunch or snack, that's how you get to the minimum 3 servings a day. So when it comes to whole grains, the U.S. dietary guidelines suggest that we aim for at least half of our grain servings, or on average about 3 servings a day. So quinoa, for example, people have more awareness of that than they used to in the past. Quinoa is also, it's a whole grain and also a source of healthy, complete dietary protein. Fiber, bulgur, barley, spelt, teff, oatmeal, brown rice, whole wheat, or anything made with these are all excellent choices for whole grains. I encourage people to go online. There are countless recipes for how to make these tasty. So, for example, you can cook something like brown rice or quinoa in a broth to give it more flavor. Just some tips for buying bread and cereals. So you want to look after the word ingredients on the ingredient label. You want to see the word whole in there. That means the primary ingredient is a whole grain. If you then look on the dietary fact sheet and see that there is at least 2 to 3 grams of fiber per slice of bread and no added sugar, those are some good easy hints. I like to add in there to look for slices of bread that have calories in the double digits, because that means it's going to be a reasonable slice of bread. Some breads contain all the right ingredients, but they're pretty large. So depending upon what your calorie goals are, it may be really helpful to look for those double-digit calories. And for cereals, try to find those that are at least 4 grams of fiber, less than 5 grams of sugar per serving. So what about nuts, seeds, and beans? So nuts, seeds, and beans get a lot of special attention from research about the DASH diet. So when we look at diets that have been studied for their plant-based qualities, the 2 diets that have been studied the most in the plant-based world is the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. And the DASH diet was originally studied to look at how may it lower someone's risk of developing high blood pressure or help someone control high blood pressure, acknowledging that it's about more than just sodium. And nuts and seeds and legumes contain very healthful elements that may help to control blood pressure, but also lower your cholesterol, lower your cancer risk, increase your fiber intake. So to add nuts and seeds, we should aim for at least 4 to 5 servings per week from this category. So you can add nuts to hot or cold cereal or yogurt. You can put them in salads to add crunch. You can toss them in stir fries, pasta, cooked grains like brown rice or quinoa. You can combine them with nuts and make a trail mix to take along. Legumes, any kind, are fine. They can be dry, they can be canned. You can use them to replace some of the protein in a recipe. So, for example, less red meat, more beans in a chili. You can put them in stews and casseroles. You could replace chips with hummus and vegetables at a meal or at a snack. You can toss beans in with salads, put them in a grain bowl, and there are loads of other additional tips on how to do this at the website for the American Institute for Cancer Research, where I got these. So what about fiber supplements like Metamucil, Benefiber, Citracel? So I think it's important to appreciate, yes, they can help prevent constipation, which is valuable. They are also sometimes used to control diarrhea. These water-soluble fibers like Benefiber, for example, can sop up some of the extra fluid in the GI tract and help manage diarrhea. But according to the American Cancer Society, studies on fiber supplements, including psyllium and wheat bran fiber, such as the ones listed here, have not found that they reduce the risk of colon polyps. Therefore, the American Cancer Society recommends that we stay committed to that idea of eating more dietary fiber from plant foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. This would also apply, by the way, to highly processed foods that have fibers added to them. So, they can add to the kind of fiber count for the day, but we definitely don't want to try to align basically highly processed foods with fiber added to them with the same benefits from eating, whole grain toast with peanut butter on it, for example. So as with much of nutrition, the whole foods approach still applies. So in terms of ideas of adding fiber to each meal, so this is how I would encourage you to kind of break it down. Let me look at my meals and snacks and see how I can add them in. You can choose whole grain cereals and breads with breakfast. Incorporate fruits like berries and bananas into your oatmeal or any kind of fruit, raisins. I had raisins and half a banana in my oatmeal this morning. You can sprinkle chia seeds or other seeds on your yogurt. You can sprinkle it on cereal as well. For lunch, you can choose whole grain breads. You can add fiber foods like avocado or beans or hummus to a sandwich. You can add legumes to chickpeas or black beans to salads. You can add extra to soup. So even if someone was having a pre-made soup, you could always add extra beans to bump up the fiber. And then for dinner, vegetables, ideally half the plate. You want to experiment with whole grains like brown or wild rice, quinoa, whole grain pastas. They now make these lentil pastas and other legumes as well. And then you can add beans to soups and salads, and then snacking on fruits, vegetables, nuts, or seeds. So, in summary, most people eat some fruits and vegetables, but not the volume that we think is really needed to provide these benefits of eating a diet high in fiber that we've been talking about. So I meant to look it up and I forgot, but I think the average American is consuming one or fewer servings of fruit and maybe a serving of vegetables a day. So we have a ways to go in order to actually really increase our consumption of foods that contain fiber. It's eating more fiber is generally easier if you do more of your own food prep versus eating out frequently. So when you think about if we say we want people to cover a third to a half of their plate with vegetables at a meal, if you take the lettuce and tomato out of a sandwich, those are like bonus vegetables. I would add some baby carrots on the side, add a side salad, or eat some leftover vegetables from the night before to really bump up that fiber. Fiber from whole foods offer unique health benefits that fiber added to highly processed foods do not. And a good place to start is to think about adding in. So, with healthy eating, we're often thinking about taking away. This is about adding in. Look at each meal and snack that you're already eating and jot down ways to add fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes to each of these eating episodes. So now we have a few minutes for questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, Hillary, for that
You're welcome.
important program on fiber. I learned a bunch of things that I probably should have known. So, um, as
Nope.
I mentioned earlier, the session was recorded and it will be posted on our Blum YouTube playlist. So please keep an eye out for that. I didn't see any questions come through. As a reminder to our live audience, please type your questions that you might have into the chat, so Hillary can answer them. And we can wait a minute and see if anyone has any questions. What is the health benefit for prebiotics?
So prebiotics are what feed the probiotics. So prebiotics are compounds that come from plant foods. So fiber is a very prominent prebiotic. So the healthy microbes, the probiotics, eat the prebiotics, and as a byproduct of the digestion of those fibers, there's also another phytonutrient category called polyphenols that are important prebiotics. So these plant elements are what really nurture these microbes to be able to make all the health promoting compounds that they're capable of. So again, probiotics are the organisms that live in our gut. Prebiotics are the food for the probiotics to make all these health promoting compounds. So again, it sounds like a weird association, but I often say, taking a probiotic supplement and not eating fiber is like buying a goldfish and never feeding it. Eventually you're going to find it's, floating belly up on top of the water. So rather than trying to drill down on, oh, should I take probiotics? I think a much better use of people's energy is to focus on eating more fiber to nurture the healthy microbes that are already present in our system.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, we do have one more. Uh, what's your opinion on drinks supplemented with prebiotics?
So, the food industry in this country has a way of doing what we call putting lipstick on a pig. So if it's a like there are probiotic beverages, and then there are probiotic beverages with prebiotics in them that aren't loaded with sugar and are reasonable options in terms of hydration choices. But anything that has a lot of sugar added to it and then has something like prebiotics added to it or probiotics added to it. I think I would just use them with caution. So any way that people can get these in that kind of they enjoy, so it kind of allows them to hit that recommendation. It's part of the process, but I would definitely not, again, equate them with plant foods that naturally occur, the balance and variety and unique nature of prebiotics that are in foods. I would not equate that with what goes into one of these beverages, particularly if it's something that also is, pretty high in sugar.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for these great questions as well. I think that's all for today. I appreciate you coming on, Hillary. And
Sure, of
thank you
course.
everyone for being here.
Have a good
Thank
day,
you.
everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.